Thank you, Wade. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So I'm Mike Schwartz. I'm the founder of Gluu, and I'm also the host of a podcast called OpenSourceUnderdogs.com. So if you're starting a software business, you might want to listen to that. It's some great advice from leaders in the open source industry. So I don't want you to leave this presentation without understanding what the heck Gluu does. So let me just start with the real basic explanation. If you've ever logged into a website, you put in a username and password, and that's called authentication. So that's at really the heart of what Gluu software does. If you have a lot of websites, tens or hundreds, and each of those websites implements its own way to authenticate users, you'll have a lot of duplicated code, you'll have worse security, you'll have worse scalability. So Gluu is a server that allows one place to centralize user authentication and allows all of these applications out there to centralize this central authentication service. After we know who you are, we might want to make policies like, based upon who you are, what can you do? Which APIs can you call? Which websites can you visit? What data can you access? That's called policy management or authorization. So you're probably thinking, well, there must be a lot of companies out there that do this, and you'd be right about that. This is an old problem, dating back, since computers were invented. So at first glance, it seems like a very competitive market. We look at the market into three segments. There are SaaS companies, for example, Okta, even Microsoft has a service called Azure AD, Google Identity, Oracle has a SaaS service. So there's the SaaS market is one segment. For companies that want to deploy this software on-prem, there's Oracle, IBM, CA, and there's also Ping Identity and ForgeRock. So there's a number of commercial on-prem vendors. But in the open source on-prem market, there's really only three vendors. There's ourselves, there's Red Hat has a product, and there's a company called WSO2. And within that open source segment, Gluu is one of the technical leaders, and with 2,000 downloads per month, we also see wide adoption of Gluu, globally. Gluu's maybe not exactly a startup. We've been around since 2009, so we're going on 10 years this year. So we have a pretty wide installed base and lots of users. So there are other companies out there, some who have exited, so we can get an idea about valuations. So Ping Identity and ForgeRock are the two companies we compete with most frequently, and we have an idea of their valuations. Ping recently sold to private equity at $600 million. I think that was a pretty good deal for Vista Equity. In the SaaS market, companies are valued even more highly. So Duo was acquired for $2.3 billion. Okta also has a huge market valuation. So this is a really big opportunity, and these companies are valued really highly. The Gluu is a platform. It's not just one single piece of software, and that platform includes server software, client software, two-factor authentication software, an API gateway. Without bragging about all the great customers we have, Gluu is serving federal governments around the world, telcos, financial institutions, healthcare, consumer-facing. So we have a pretty broad adoption of customers using the product. So 10 years is a long time. What's changing now that we think that we can put Gluu on a better growth scale? And what I'd say is, 2 years ago we made a commitment to move to open core business model. Open core is where you have certain parts of the product are free and certain parts you charge for. That pivot took some effort. It's easier said than done to release new products. In our industry where everything's mission critical and highly secure, it takes us a while, but we've completed that pivot, and at this point we feel like in 2019 we're ready to really execute on the open core model and really achieve a higher growth rate. So the question with open core is always what do you charge for and what do you give away? So certainly compliance and audit features are something that enterprises are willing to pay for. some high-end security features that we know like only banks and finance companies want. We're going to charge for that. And some extra bells and whistles, which are not exactly core, but they're nice to have, and some companies want them. We're currently doing $1.5 million in recurring revenues, and we're projecting 50% growth. So there's the hockey stick everyone wants. We're trying to raise a Series A right now, mostly to invest in sales and marketing and increase not just our market share, but our wallet share. So yes, we want to get more customers, but by upselling our existing customer base, we think we can capture more revenue per customer, and that will also help us get on a faster growth rate. So I'm going to give back a minute 15 for questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Gluu. And now Gluu has about 5 minutes for Q&A from our panel of judges.
A few quick questions. Have you raised capital before? Why go straight to Series A right now, depending on the answer to the first question? And then the third question is, how is the open core pivot kind of unfolding? It's definitely a transition, but I wasn't clear on what you were doing before. Was it just support services and then you were open sourcing additional things? Or, sorry, sprinkled a few questions.
That's a lot of questions, yeah. So we were selling support primarily. That was the business model, and also building the software. Gluu is a big, complicated product, and it just took a long time to build the product.
Yeah.
We have been bootstrapping the company. We are fortunate in that we had a very supportive community, and we had time to develop it. Why go to a Series A? We feel like, well, after 10 years, we have some initial investors, small investors that we want to recapitalize and cash out. And we're not attached to whatever we call a funding round, but Series A seemed right.
Cool. I had one question on ForgeRock, actually. Sorry for asking all these questions. Mm-hmm. I think they have a few auth-NZ projects that are open source. Is that, am I correct or not?
So ForgeRock, it's a good example of how an open source company can go, sort of fall off the edge. The original mission was open source, but after raising about $150 million, open source went out the window. So now they said that they're going to open source certain older versions, but it's not clear if that'll ever happen. And at this point, they're just straight commercial offering.
Got it. Cool.
Relative to the competition that you acknowledged, which is, obviously very well funded and has a lot of traction in the market, why would I buy your product instead of theirs outside of the fact that it's open source? I mean, that will be interesting to me, but it may not be critical to me in a buying decision. What is it that's, really driving the buying decision ahead of some of these other guys up there?
Yeah, customers don't necessarily care about open source. Some do. There are 3 reasons why people buy Gluu. One is that we don't have per user pricing on the core server. So if you're a country and you do per user pricing, that's actually a tax on citizens. So I think that certain consumer-facing applications, the business model of per user pricing, which is what our competitors use, doesn't fit for a lot of large consumer-facing applications. So that's one use case. Really paranoid customers who like the transparency of open sources. Some of the federal government or military applications, they like the transparency of the open source. And the third reason is productizers. We have a number of companies where the Gluu server is actually a part of their product, and they need the IP to be clear in order for them to deliver their service or product. Generally, I'm biased. I think the Gluu server open source development has been a great development methodology for us, and we've seen that the product's just better. It's more innovative, we're quicker to get to market, and we've leveraged the ability to incorporate open source products to really deliver a more flexible, just a better product.
So one follow-up. The customers that buy your stuff, are you winning them away from one of the competitors you listed generally, or is it mostly greenfield customers that are, either in your pipeline or currently paying you?
Almost so our customers are mostly large organizations, and they're all looking at the commercial offerings. We compete with Ping or ForgeRock on almost every deal. And actually, price isn't a huge issue for them. They got plenty of money, so it's really about choosing the best technology. So we have to go head-to-head on the technology and on the roadmap. And the price is not normally a huge driver in the decision. You're not going to sacrifice security to save a couple bucks.
So I have a comment and a question. We had the pleasure of looking at your slide deck as we came into this event. So I saw on one slide that your plan was to capture 80% market share, and that kind of raised a flag because it's a big number, and unless you have a monopoly in your electric company or something.
I don't think I remember that slide.
Oh, okay.
Actually, so the market for companies that need to authenticate users is every organization in the world, every nonprofit, every business, every even church or soccer team needs. So no company in this is a highly fragmented market, and the great thing about it is that it's a huge market. But no company is going to get 80%,
right.
Not even Microsoft.
So just go check that,
yeah.
Just because maybe I misinterpreted it.
Yeah.
And so the second thing, and I could be way off with this, but how do you see the blockchain functionality impacting what you're doing today?
So as an entrepreneur, I think it's always important to be in the market that's expanding right now, not in the adjacent market. Adjacent possible is a very bad place for entrepreneurs. And so the market that we're in right now is exploding. Two-factor authentication, API security, central authentication, federation, tons of demand. Blockchain's an adjacent possible where we see some interesting applications, but that's for the next entrepreneurs. That's for you guys. But Gluu is focusing on what we can make money on today.
But why is today the right time for you to raise money versus a year from now or last year? What is it that is driving the market today for you to raise money?
Part of it is just so we're doing some corporate restructuring of debt, and we want to cash out some investors who are holding some debt. And part of it is that we feel like the product is stable enough, and that the market is the 2FA adoption is in the right place, and we feel constrained by capital, and that by adding a little more gas in the tank at this point, that we could actually use that effectively. I think the other thing is that we have the right business model right now. It took us a while to put ourselves in a position where we could leverage a licensed model on a certain portion to achieve the type of growth that we need to really justify putting that external money to work.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for our second presenter in the startup pitch competition.